Stephen, you have hands-on experience as a bookmaker, a punter, and a journalist. So I think your background is second to none for discussing how you got the betting bug from a young age. And also, this is unique for me because we actually share a career path about 20 years ago. You estimated it was 30 years ago, which I was slightly offended by. It was 20 years ago. We both worked at Sporting Index. So I'd like to start there. So before we get to Sporting Index years, let's just, the first question is, do you remember what the first bet you had as a youngster?
Yeah. Hi, David. I think Sporting Index, you were a sort of computer geek, weren't you? But before computers had been invented. That was the amazing thing, because it definitely was about 30 years ago. But anyway, we'll come on to that later. Yeah, the first sort of betting memory, I think, like everyone usually has a dad who was interested in racing and greyhound racing. So he used to take me to Hove greyhounds occasionally, Wimbledon greyhounds probably once a week, and we used to go to Plumpton and Fontwell. And I did, I wasn't one of those kids who had to be dragged there. I did find it quite interesting, and I used to bet with my dad in sort of 50p's, or probably 5p's to be honest, because it's probably 40 years ago.
Right.
So that was how I got into it, basically, a shared family connection, really.
So you say as a kid, as what sort of age were you?
Probably 10, 11, 12, that sort of thing, going racing and going to the dogs. And it was a treat to stay out late. And in those days, the dogs in particular used to get big crowds. So there was a mega atmosphere. I remember going to Wembley one night and, people forget that it used to be dog racing at Wembley Stadium. And although it got lost a bit in that Wembley's so big, obviously it can hold 100,000 people or whatever. This is the old Wembley. And there used to be probably 1,000 people there. It was still a fantastic atmosphere. There used to be bookmakers, like 40 bookmakers along the front of the home straight sort of thing. So, yeah, it's very hard to believe, really, how things have changed. It's all gone online, hasn't it?
And so at that age, as a 10-year-old, do you remember sort of understanding what odds were and the fractions and whatnot?
I think so. I think I sort of understood percentages and stuff quite quickly, and looking at betting markets, and often I found the betting markets more interesting than the actual spectacle, particularly at the dogs. If you haven't got you're just going for a night out sort of thing, to watch the money changing hands, and obviously when you're 10 or 12, and so the bad language and the atmosphere between the bookmakers and the punters, and the swearing and the cut and thrust of it all, and how they used to pile on. And what my first job interview I went for was actually at Hackney Stadium, which was just to when the new Hackney Stadium, it was all getting built around that time, and I went for a job in the racing office there. But I remember sort of driving to Hackney, I think I was like 17 or 18, and having just passed my driving test, and I was absolutely terrified. It was like the Wild West,
Right.
It has improved a bit since then, but maybe not that much.
So as it sort of came to you naturally, were you mathematical as a kid?
Not sort of in a sort of university doing maths way, but I did understand odds and prices, I think, and I was fascinated by bookmaking, basically, very interested in it, on course bookmaking.
And so your father, do you remember him sort of being a successful punter? Did he take it seriously? Was it all just a bit of fun?
He was very interested in it. He would have only been a very small punter, 5s and 10s, but he was interested in. I mean, he was interested in the computer side of it. He was an IT background, so he did do a lot of sort of analysis of greyhounds and things like that. He was very interested in it. Actually, thinking back, he actually used to. He ran a like a computer analysis thing of. This says very niche, but when greyhounds are returning from their seasonal date, they tend to peak. And he discovered that, which was known, people knew it, but around about sort of between 14 weeks and 19 weeks was a golden period where bitches returning from their season peak, and they tend to have a very high strike rate. And actually, at this period that he looked at Wimbledon, this was that you'd make a profit, quite a substantial profit, just backing them every run between that window. Which was this was early days of computers. This is a long time ago. I mean, my dad died when he was 50 something. So, but he did, he did a lot of analysis of these things. So I guess I have got that sort of interest. But
I mean, before his time, then that's amazing. And finding an edge and something that the bookmakers weren't aware of.
Yeah, and I think what I've learned from that is you need to find things, as you do with sharp betting, that is a niche. It's no good you saying to your subscribers, "I really fancy Manchester City winning
Yeah,
this weekend." That's
yeah,
it's just not what it's about, is it?
yeah,
You've got
yeah,
to find the women's netball team in Slovenia, or the boxer that nobody's heard of on the undercard. I think
yeah,
things that hasn't got a spotlight on it,
yeah,
basically. And I think, things that bitches out of season,
yeah.
looking for things that aren't obvious, that aren't in the public domain, really.
And then now and then you get the high profile one, and that's great to sort of just that's great conversational piece. But yeah, the bread and butter is with the niche stuff, and so I know you talk about. I've seen a few of your interviews, and you do talk about keeping relevant, evolving all the time, and that seems sort of quite apparent from what you've done in your career, both sides of the bookmaking world. So let's go back to Sporting Index. So what I think we met in 2000. We weren't. You said I was a tech nerd, which is kind of correct and also not correct. But yeah, so you were on the trading side. So how did you get that job? What had you been doing before then?
Well, I worked my first ever job out of university. I worked on the Racing Channel on Teletext, David. That's
Oh
showing
yeah,
my age for you. The Racing Channel Teletext. So that was very early days, and I did a bit of in the text room. It was called, liaising with the courses that people sending the shows back to the shops, basically, and the online businesses hadn't emerged by then. So that was that. I was quite a successful punter on a smallish scale. I did bet with Sporting Index. One of my friends went from the Racing Channel to Sporting Index, and then I followed him, basically, probably a year or so later, and started on.
Who was that?
I think it's probably Mark Wilson and one or two others as
Yeah,
well. Yeah. So and then I went to Sporting Index, started doing the racing at a small level, learned how to convert fixed odds to the spreads,
yeah,
which was this is how old I am. I do feel like I'm quite old, ancient telling, especially because you're quite savvy and I'm certainly not. But I used to work out the spread prices on a bit of paper, scribbling. You'd walk in hungover from the night before or tired from the night before, start trying to price a race up, convert it into spreads, convert it into double cards, favourites, distances, match bets, indexes. No Betfair.
yeah,
So you got the Racing Post. I had Timeform on paper, so I used to carry these things from Timeform in every day. Form books were sort of above my desk. I mean, it's like you talk to young people now; they think you're flipping 100 years old, basically.
Well, I'm sure there will be somebody watching who doesn't know what I've forgotten even what you called it. Teletext. They wouldn't even know what that is. Yeah.
Well, it's like it was like CFAX, where you click on the TV and you'd be waiting for the racing results. There's no internet.
Yeah, it was basically our version of Twitter for 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And okay, so and how long were you at Sporting Index?
It must have been, I guess, 15 years or so, something like that. During that time, straight out of university, I got a pitch at the dogs, basically, because I did go dog racing. I went horse racing a lot at university. Because I mean, people probably won't relate to it now, but university used to be about. I did politics at university. I did about 7 hours a week. I got everything done in about 3 weeks, and the other 7 weeks I went racing every single day, basically, or dog racing. So I was pally with a few bookmakers. Someone dropped out at Reading Dogs. So as soon as I finished university, I got a pitch at the dogs, basically, and did that for best part of probably 20 years, really. Amazing. Reading and Oxford. So that was brilliant fun, but it's quite tiring. And having a full-time job as well in London, getting to Reading from Paddington, cabs. It was trains, planes and automobiles, getting back at midnight to King's Cross. So I lived in London at the time. Then back into Sporting Index. So it was a roller coaster of, punting at work, working, going to the dogs and it was busy. This is like 1990s, early 2000s. There was still a lot of action on course. There was money around, warm money, not mug money, warm money. But
I do remember the Sporting Index. So I used to do the boxing odds there before I moved into sort of like product roles, and we would take massive bets. And I do remember, was that true of the racing as well? Like, it's frightening. I mean, the limits they had for the spreads were colossal.
But there was no affordability checks, David. You could do what you like. I mean, we all got credit accounts. I was like, 20 something. I mean, I had a tote credit account when I was about 14.
Right.
I mean, perhaps that shouldn't be said, but this is totally different times. There's no gambling commission. There's no affordability checks. I mean, it's a very dangerous time. You've got given credit with the spread firms, and we saw people who lost millions, literally, and it was all unchecked. I mean, without Sporting Index, I know it's still limping along. It's still just about going, isn't it? But I mean, when there used to be a 0-0 in the football, when they started televising live football, Sporting Index used to win millions.
Yeah.
Because everyone used to buy shirt numbers. They wanted action. I mean, if it ended like 8-6 to Manchester United, they lost $1 million. But if it was 0-0, they were the terms, the spreads, are huge margins and all the rest of it. It was a fantastic business. But it was an eye opener because you did meet. So like yourself, there were some very clever people there, some very shrewd punters, and I'd never met punters like that before. That was,
Well, I thought it it exposed me to a level. So I was doing, because at that company on the trading floor, there was the senior desk and the junior desk, if you remember, and it was basically taking phone calls, logging bets from customers before the internet was available, and I remember and also there was a sort of this unwritten rule on the trading floor that if you priced something up, you honoured your prices.
Yeah.
Right?
So and privately.
Yes. So I remember that, and there was some huge punts. I remember walking up past the guys, one of the traders. You'll know who I'm talking about, and I think he had like 6 or 7 figures in his Betfair account, sitting there ready to play with. He was a massive punter. I priced up an Oscar De La Hoya fight. He came over and he wanted to I can't remember, buy or sell the fight minutes. And he wanted a stake that just gave me nightmares. But I had to take the bet, because if I'm pricing up, and it made up, I think like 1 or 2 minutes away from the line. So I got away with one. But
it was also an amazing place. I mean, I remember speaking to. I mean, the first thing I remember is I sat at one of the directors' desks when he was off, because we never had a place we sat in the same place, did we? So used to move it, which was horrendous. But
move the ashtrays out the way.
Of course, they were smoking. But we did have a chef. I mean, how I've stayed so slim, David, I do not know. But we had a chef in there, didn't we? So I remember sitting at this director's desk, and the private line rang. There was a work phone and the private line was private punters, basically. And see, in both. Anyway, I won't go into what was done, but let's just say there's a lot of punting went on. And on the sticker of this computer, which was obviously the size of a giant suitcase in those days, there was a sticker saying I was Merson's bookie, which when you look back in hindsight, it was actually true. I mean, some of these things, I mean, there's a lot more stories, but obviously some of them need to go in a book, after you're dead, sort of thing. But
without naming names, I remember getting a call from a commentator, for a well-known commentator who was covering some sport live, and he booked a bet with me, and I was like, great, booked the bet. He went on TV half an hour later, and he predicted something completely different for the audience. So like what he was saying to the audience was totally different to what his pocket was doing.
But what Sporting Index are really good at, and I'm not sure it's matched these days because the firms don't like to talk about it, but when they've done their orchestras, say it was 4-0 or 4-3 to Barcelona against Man United on one of these Sky games, it's all early days of televised sport, live football and stuff. Wally Pyra, fantastic. I love brilliant pioneer in his field. Would be on BBC One on the racing at Ascot and say, well, we had a disaster last night. We lost £3 million on the Manchester United game because they won 4-3. Lots of goals. All of our customers were piling into shirt numbers. It was fantastic PR, and of course you've got everyone opening accounts with the firms.
He was great. Good times. Some good times and bad times at that place. What do you do now in terms of like the betting industry? What's your main focus?
Well, I punt basically, and I produce daily racing selections, which I have done for 15 years for Betting Expert, and they're sort of available on my YouTube channel, which I've managed to cleverly slip in subtly on the bottom of the screen there. So I'm very keen for people to subscribe. It's all now. I was with Betting Expert. It's all now under one roof with me, basically, and they're free. It's free, and that we show a profit. I think it's about 7% over the last 15 years or so.
Wow.
Obviously, if you've got an account where you can get on in the morning and stuff, it's worth following. So yeah, I do that really, and that means that I've got some sort of income that's guaranteed, other than just punting basically.
So I've seen your YouTube stuff like over the years, and you tend to put out at least a couple of things a day. Is that still the case?
Yeah, two selections basically 7 days a week. So
And,
yeah, and we've got lots of thousands of followers and stuff, which is great. And you can interact with me and tell me I'm useless when we have 10 losers in a row, and hopefully respond, and hopefully it's educational in a way. If people are getting into it for the first time and they're in their 20s and they want to get into horse racing and stuff, hopefully it's useful.
And is it horse racing and greyhounds?
Horse racing only. I mean, personally, I bet on mainly jumps racing myself, and a couple of greyhound tracks that I do on the exchanges, basically.
And so, and away from that, do you bet? I know you've got quite a varied sort of sports knowledge. So, do you bet on other sports recreationally as well?
I try not to. I mean, I can't deny that if there's football on a Sunday afternoon, I'll probably back the draw or back 0-0 to try and trade it and things like that. But I wouldn't be a winner at sports like football or cricket or anything like that. It's I can't say. A lot of people say no, I'd never bet on anything else. But as a sort of recreational, I suppose, if you're not watching the racing or between races, I don't mind watching the football and things like that. So.
I'm perfectly happy that the two things can coexist. I will bet on a systematic approach, and I can't help betting on every Grand Slam tennis tournament, the Six Nations, every boxing, everything. Part of watching a sport is predicting what's going to happen.
Absolutely. Horse racing and greyhound racing. If you haven't got an interest or thought about what price things should be, or have some knowledge of it, in itself, it's not that wonderfully interesting, is it? Yeah. If dogs are running around, 6 dogs are running around, they haven't got jackets on, you're not actually going to go and watch them for long. It is the betting. Yeah. The difference maybe with things like boxing and football is, I guess, that you would enjoy a boxing match. Yeah. You don't have to have a financial interest in it, and you can certainly enjoy a football match if you want one of the teams to win. Yeah. Whereas football with greyhounds and horses, it's definitely a betting product, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. But I think if you follow a sport to any sort of degree, you naturally predict. You think what you predict. You can't help but make predictions. So we've got Djokovic at the French Open now, 38. He's in the semi-final, quarter-final. You naturally think, well, should he be 8-1 on at this stage in a tournament? Perhaps it is time to oppose him. You can't help but think that. Then you look online and you see that he's only 3-1 on. You're like, well, that's maybe I've got to back him then.
Yeah. I mean, markets are absolutely fascinating, and they're more fascinating if you can find things away from the obvious. So, for instance, I'll price up Hove Greyhounds, for instance, which has got quite a strong market online on the exchanges, but there aren't thousands of people looking at it. There are probably 100 who will price it up properly, maybe a bit more than that. But so you can find things that maybe away from the obvious aren't commented on. Of course, one of the problems is, and I'm sure you know this with boxing and other things, that the people who are left now, where we are now in 2025, are not recreational punters playing into exchanges. They are people who've stood the test of time. They've got a few quid. They know what they're doing, and the markets are absolutely granite. That you're not getting 20-1 about something that's 6-1. You might still get 10-1, but you might also be wrong. It might be a 20-1 chance.
So how does that work, Stephen? Then, like, are you like pen and paper when you're pricing up a dog race, or like, what are your inputs before you go and look at other pricing sort of prices out there?
I price up 2 dog tracks basically, so that's quite a lot. It doesn't sound like a lot, but they probably race, I don't know, 10 times a week or 9 times a week, something like that. So you're pricing up over 100 dog races a week, and pricing them to 100 on a bit of. I still just put things on paper and have a look at things basically in that way. So I'm old-fashioned things, but I try, as you're saying about evolving. One looks now a lot more like things like place markets, forecast markets, things like that. I'm probably more instinctively a layer than a punter historically. So mainly I'd be looking at things. I mean, to give you an example, things you used to be able to do that you can't now, David. You used to be able to, in illiquid markets, which the greyhounds are, until the last sort of 3 minutes or 2 minutes before a race jumps off, you could put up. So say you made something 20, and you wanted to be against it. You don't give in earthly. It's coming back from lameness. It's off trials. You saw it run in a trial. It checked at the bend. It didn't look right. It looks a 25 to 1 chance. You could put up £100 in the win market at 6 or 7 to 1, 50 quid at 8 to 1, 50 quid. So you're blocking.
Yeah.
Nobody lays it. There's no money in there yet. It's 5 minutes, 6 minutes to the off. On the place market at one time, without going into too much details, it was very automated. Clever people who are into robots and algorithms would put up bets related to the win market to back greyhounds to be placed. So you'd get the 2 quid matched at 7 to 1 in the win market, and there'd be 60 quid appear at 5 to 2 backing it a place, for instance. Now its right place price is probably about 12 to 1.
Yeah.
So that has now finished, by the way, because it's all been hoovered up and gone. But that lasted quite a long time, that you could manipulate the win market to be able to lay something in the place market. Once you've got your 160 quid out of it at 5 to 2 from off robots, basically, you can delete what was in the win market. The market adjusts, and it probably ends up 20 and 6 to 1 in the same. So, but that's gone now. I mean, that lasted about 18 months. One of the new exchanges was very good at pumping money into markets, and it doesn't last. Like all good things, it often comes to an end.
I was going to say, most people talk about that sort of 2-year window where it really was. And so do you think that year on year, you talk about a 7% edge all time going back 15, 20 years or whatever, but do you think it is getting harder year on year, or do you think you could still have a 2025 that's the best ever?
I think it's got a lot harder, and I think you can only cut your cloth to the markets now. And the markets I play, I'm not a football person. I play into the horse racing markets have collapsed on the exchanges. That they're down to like 100 grand. They used to be £1 million. I mean, obviously you can still do things at Royal Ascot and Cheltenham, but then everything's been analysed to death. There's no great huge mega ricks. The final prices are pretty much right, and they're fairly accurate from an early stage. I think the sort of smashing away days are probably over in the markets I play in. So I try to grind out a profit each year, basically.
So either with the horse racing or the dogs, or in sports betting, is the one bet over your many years that you've really sort of, I know you talked about, I saw an interview with you and you're very anti the booming of successful results, but I'd like to know if you have got one where you've really thought you deserved to boom it.
Well, I was a bookie at the dogs for nearly 20 years. So that does teach you not to boom, not to shout wages. Because apart from anything else, as a bookie, the punters do not like that, and quite right too. You shouldn't do it. I think once or twice I have sort of, I had to look this up. This is how old. I think 1990, when I discovered I was actually only 17. It's hard to believe, I know. But there was a horse called New Halen who won at the Cheltenham Festival. And the terrible thing about this story, I did actually back it. And I wouldn't say it got me going, but I probably won like 3 grand or something, which was a hell of a lot when you're 17. But it was a 66 to 1 chance. But the terrible thing, I did tell this story a long time ago, and I've read a Victor Chandler book recently, and he backed it. So it sounds like I've made the whole thing up based on reading about Victor Chandler. But anyway, so I remember the main thing that got me going in bookmaking, I just started at the dogs, probably had a year at the dogs. And I was quite brave, I think, and watched the videos. It was a video then. You used to put a video in, press play, rewind it 30 seconds, watch it again, make notes, I remember sitting in a flat in Islington. I mean, it's a real rock and roll lifestyle, re-watching greyhound videos. But the one that got me going a bit as a bookmaker was a dog called Blue Merlin, who got beat, actually. It was like once a year at Reading, we had the Reading Masters, which was the equivalent of the Greyhound Derby. And the whole of greyhound racing went there as they go to Toaster now. It was a big competition, very, very big betting heats. No Betfair, obviously. So it was all people's opinions. It was very raw. We bet very fairly. I mean, I remember betting sort of 107, 108 on the board, come and get it sort of thing. It was a bit like that. So I was trying to make a bit of a name for myself and try and attract business and custom and regular punters, basically, and get going. But I had an absolutely terrible book. We bet anti-post as well, which is another minefield to get into. But we had a terrible book. I probably had 20 grand in the whole world, and I think we had something for like 20 something grand. You know, it was sleepless nights job. And anyway, he got his dog called Blue Merlin. The only reason I'm telling the story is he obviously got beat. You know, it's terrible tromboning. If Chris Paul's watching, he'll be posting trumpets all over this. But yeah, and that got me going, because on finals night you could take probably nearly 100 grand. You turn it, which is quite big in dog racing. It's big. It's all cash. It's big. It was a big thing. So it's blinding turnover, and in that final, Blue Merlin went off about 7 or 4 on and got beat, and the winner was completely unlayable. So it was a sort of, and when you're starting off and you've got like 20 grand in the world, if that 20 grand had gone, then you're relying on tapping someone to get you going again for a couple of grand, aren't you? You know, so yeah.
Those are brilliant. So you've got the 66 to 1 crazy experience, and you've got the odds-on shot getting turned over. So
that's what I remembered. Yeah, because I had to look it up. I must admit, I haven't got that mentality where I sort of remember that such and such a dog won yesterday. I did have 20 years of coming home to my wife and sort of saying, "How did you get on tonight at the dogs?" And I might have done 7 grand, but I lost small, disappointed, very quiet, or there'd been a big result. You'd had a miracle. You bumped into 10 grand. You certainly didn't say, "I've won 10 grand." You said, "Yeah, we won small." It was quite busy. You might, let's go and buy a new sofa next week. It was a bit like that, you know.
It's what we talked about before we started recording. It's like you make the decisions, you place the bets, you've got the money down, you've got the turnover. Then what else happens after that is out of your control, and you just have to get used to that.
But also, I do think there's a difference now. I mean, when I was in my 20s being a bookmaker at dogs, I wouldn't say I was fearless, but you didn't really have a lot to lose, did you? You know, as long as you could pull up the 600 quid rent. I mean, we rented a flat in Islington. You weren't under too much pressure. Whereas I think now, as you get older, whether you've got wives, kids, whatever, life's a lot more expensive as you get older, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got to be pretty good to still be standing them for tens and 20 grand. You know.
And I mean, certainly what we do is not for everyone. You have to have a certain mindset to sort of. But I agree with you about the unnecessary sort of flaunting of successes. That boom thing online is awful. But I also, I despise the trumpet motif on Twitter of it's okay for people to celebrate things they've done well. And there's a British thing where we're so, we don't like seeing people celebrate their successes. In America, they love people celebrating their successes. And when I see like middle-aged men putting trumpet emojis just because some chap's back to 20 to 1 winner for a couple of quid and he wants to tell his mates on Twitter, I'm like, good on you. And this trumpet thing, I'm just like,
I can see both sides of it. I can see the thing. I think a lot of punters do lie to themselves. Let's be honest. I think a lot of people like to tell people they're winning and they're flying, and the truth might be something slightly different. So I mean, that's coming back to I think the days when we were at Sporting Index, when it was the Wild West, and firms would give you 5 grand's worth of credit, and a lot of people got into trouble. And betting on, I don't think betting on credit is a good idea. Full stop for anybody, to be honest. I think you play far too big and you play up to, and a lot of time. So there did need to be some. I'm not saying affordability check. I mean, the trouble is now it's gone so much the other way, and we've got such a Puritan sort of idea and it's destroying a lot of smaller firms. You're going to end up in a scenario, if we're not careful, where the only firms left are going to be the mega firms who have all started to merge together. There's going to be 3 or 4 of them left. They'll have every single recreational tenor acca punter in the world, and there isn't any competition for them. And we are sort of heading towards that a bit, aren't we? Where they've got complete control of the prices. Certainly with regard to racing and horse racing, the SPs now are very closely manipulated by the people who are laying the prices. And that's the road we're going down. That is what happens when you remove competition from the market. When you get dominant players running a monopoly. That's where we're heading, unfortunately, and it's under the guise of affordability a lot of the time.
Just to call back to the whole sort of celebrating of successes, I also think it's like really counterproductive for the industry as a whole, to discourage people going online and posting their wins, because people want, for marketing purposes, you want to go online and go, oh look, that guy's had a great win. That guy's had a great win. It's like you want people to, believe that it's possible to have good wins, and if you're getting trolled for doing that, then people aren't going to do it. I will post for the updates that I put on. I will post when I have a successful run and when I have a negative run, and I'll get criticism for both. I will either get told I talk too much about winnings, or I get slagged off for having a bad run. So whatever way I do it, there's going to be criticism.
Yeah, it's difficult. It is difficult. I mean, one of the things I think the firms get wrong, and of course the scale of it is unimaginable. I know people who work for the big firms, we won't name them, but the scroller, unless you've got it set to above 50 quid, you can't see it. It's moving so quickly as soon as they could turn the computer on. So it's very hard to manage. You've got to control, and they don't need punters. They've got millions of punters, so they don't need Joe Bloggs who specialises in something. They don't want it. It's expensive to operate and keep them. They've got millions of people who give them business that they do want. So I can see both sides of it. But at some point in time, you'll get to a point where young people will not want to have a bet and are not interested in it because they know that they're not allowed to win. So if you have got a bit of a clue, if you subscribe to Sharp Betting or you follow my daily selections, or if you have got a bit of a clue yourself, sort of thing, if you can't get on and you're not allowed to win, then you go and do something else, don't you? And I do think that is a big danger. I mean, the big firms will always make enough money. They've got everyone. They've got it to themselves. You know, they've got punts they want. They direct them to casinos. They direct them to ACCAs. They give them free bets and free spins and all the rest of it. But if you've removed the possibility of being able to win, I mean, going back again, we're boring back to the dark ages, but Sporting Index used to let people win 30 grand a year until you got to a meeting to discuss them. And then what would happen is you'd say, well, or people like that, he's won 37. Let's try and slow him down a bit. But for God's sake, we all want the account, because every time comes on and backs a horse, we're all running to all our different accounts privately to try and get on it. You know, I mean, it used to be absolutely. I mean, at Sporting Index, you uncovered things that I didn't know exist. Fantastic, shrewd, very hot people. You know, but you also saw, and I won't name them, someone who'd win 100 grand a year on horse racing because you've got a blinding card from Martin Pipe or something like that. But they'd lose 500 grand on football and things. So you could see that. And what the firms have now done is they've removed that being able to win the 100 grand on horse racing. They just want the 500 grand on football. So you can't blame them, but I do think it's gone too far the other way. We used to trade markets, David. They trade punters.
It's a good way of saying it. I do. Hopefully there will be sort of a pendulum swing back, because like you say, it's still the man in the street doesn't know that this restriction thing is quite prevalent. You know, most punters are not getting restricted. Right. I have conversations regularly, at least once a month, when I talk about what I do, and somebody says, "What? You can't bet anymore? Why?" They don't understand that's even a thing. Okay, so what about the opposite of the trombone and whatnot? When you've got a bet completely wrong, where you thought you've done the analysis and you've just got it absolutely wrong, and you've had to hide it. You've had to hide it from the wife.
Oh no, I don't think it's ever been quite that bad. But because for the last 20 years or so, I play within myself. Really, I think when I was younger, it was much more volatile. And things like that. But there have been disastrous nights at the Dogs. You could go months at the Dogs where you didn't win. You know, it wasn't like you walked in and picked up £1,000 a week, sort of thing. Particularly, I switched when Reading looked like it was about to shut and did shut. I went to Oxford Dogs, and it was the first time I'd been anywhere new. And you walked on there, and that was a slightly different crowd of younger. They watched the videos. They thought about it. It was a much more different crowd, and you didn't know where the shots were coming from. At Reading, I'd done like 18 years at Reading, I think, and I knew everyone. I knew what the traits of the trainers were. I knew who should be backing what and why they were and all the rest of it. You go somewhere new, somewhere different dogs, different people, different hunters. It was a bit of an education. And we were also on the bags there. So that's basically the 90% of the meetings, or 3 out of 4 of the meetings, were run for the betting shops. There was nobody in the track. So we used to have to go there, put prices up, and just stand there like lemons, basically. So that was a slightly different experience. Although it wasn't all bad at Oxford. there was no Betfair, or Betfair had only just started then. So,
so you've experienced like months on end without making profit.
oh yeah, I think definitely. You have bad spells and all the rest of it. I think you just got to carry on doing the right thing. I mean, I do when I have a losing day. Now I'll look back. I watch the videos of the greyhounds again, and I'll watch the jumps and all the rest of it, and think. Often you'll have done things wrong because we live in an exchange-driven age now. I only really do the exchanges, and you'll have been drawn into something because you think it's too short. And I think that's a failing of mine still. Now, I'll price it up to 100. I'll make it 3-1 favourite. I'll probably want to back it because I can see it's got a good chance that it'll end up 6-4. And perhaps proportionately, you end up doing too much on it because you think it's got to a ridiculous price. And it's probably because I've underestimated a weakness in one of the middle pins, who I made 7-2 or 4-1, who's actually 12-1. And in that instance, the market, I think these days, is much more perceptive than I am. I've missed it. So you can get, I do think that one thing I still do wrong is that you get drawn into laying things because they're too short, rather than because you've got a strong opinion against them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's very interesting to hear that process. So again, that's the evolving. That's that you're sort of seeing, you're analysing your own analysis, and you're sort of
Oh, you've got to back your own opinion. If you price up a boxing match, you make it 4-7, 7-4. You've got to back yourself to be right. If you can get evens, the 7 or on chance, you've got to bet, there's a 15% margin in your favour if you're right. You've got to back yourself up to a point. But I think as you get older, I probably used to think my opinion was fantastic, and now I think my first port of call is, I think the market's probably right and I've got it wrong, and you need to somehow meet in the middle. In the early days of Betfair, I would play very big because I thought I'd definitely be right. And how on earth can that be 4-1 favourite in a 20-runner Catterick handicap? But in fact, it was 4-1 favourite, and the people on the other side of making it 4-1 was probably people like Steve Goff, Peter Jones, who had looked at the other 19 runners and had thought, well, that's 1,000, that's 1,000, that can't win, that's badly drawn. 4-1 is actually a fantastic price. There's only 3 possible winners as far, So that's what you're playing against. You're not playing against recreational mugs. You're not playing against the 18-year-old kid who's just come out of private school and gets a job on a trading desk, goes 4-1 something. That's what you used to be up against. People used to price it up out the paper, basically. You're up against very shrewd and informed people.
So that's a really interesting observation through years, decades of experience. That be confident, but don't let your confidence fall into arrogance. You still have to see the signals and sort of react to those signals.
Well, on-course bookmaking is double hard now because the turnover's disappeared, generally speaking, apart from Saturdays and festivals and certain meetings. And maybe in Ireland it's better than it is in the south of England. But all the ones who went skint in the earlier days were the ones who arbed favourites and took the world against Betfair. The ones who survived kept under the favourites, probably hedged back into Betfair as well, kept on turning over, kept surviving. And when you get a good day, a good Saturday at Cheltenham or something like that, they might still bump into 5 or 10 grand, and that keep going, sort of thing. The ones who, I think it's Martin Johnson, was a very shrewd bookmaker, used to run Gem Racing. I think he said there's old pilots and bold pilots, and there's no old bold pilots.
Right.
And it's probably true in bookmaking.
So on the topic of restrictions, and obviously some of these questions you can knock back if you don't answer them, but do you know how many books you've been restricted by over the years?
Well, it hasn't really troubled me. I mean, I don't try anymore. I just play on the exchanges, to be honest. So in the past, there's some were good, some were bad. I don't think I wouldn't pick anyone out. I've still got accounts in my name that, if, for instance, to do a play spot at the Cheltenham Festival or Royal Ascot when there's a big pool and things like that. So I still can have a bet on those sorts of things if I want to. But I'm not looking to try and back things in the morning on horses or anything like that. I just play in the last few minutes, basically, of everything.
And perhaps this isn't relevant to you, but is there a favourite sports book you have in terms of like functionality? Have you got sort of like a loyalty to one over another?
Well, probably it's like Betfair and things like that. And Matchbook's very good, and BetDAC is still okay, I think. It's all exchanges, really.
Okay. So this is, I think you'll have an interesting answer to this one. If you could ask a better one question that would reveal to you how much they really understand sports betting, what would that question be?
I mean, I think I'd sort of try and ask them to price something up that they thought they knew about without looking at Betfair. I mean, one of the things I try and do, and it's easy to do with dogs because there's no markets for them, but is to try and price it up before you look at the exchanges. I think it's something I've done wrong in the past. Is that you sort of, I get up at like 5 or 6 o'clock. I get up early and try and get everything in place for the afternoon sort of thing, or for the morning with the dogs. And I think you can, if you look at the exchanges before you look at the form and look at watch the videos and things, I think it can make you look at things in the wrong way. That you've already decided. You think, well, how can that be 6-4? That looks big at 20. You're better off having a pure opinion. I'll tell you one thing I would say, David, that I'd say to all punters, really, without sounding conceited, you're better off thinking it's all straight than thinking it's all crooked.
Yeah.
Of course, in all sports, there's shades of impropriety. The market will know more for reasons, things trod on a stone, blah, blah, blah. I mean, but you're better off assuming it's completely pure and your opinion is pure and your prices are to 100. That's a much better mindset. If you go down the road of I've done my money, I've done my money this week because it was crooked, that's a very slippery slope to not doing it right, basically.
Interesting. So long term, to have that attitude that it's a fair, they're not out to get you.
Yeah, I mean, I after Sporting Index, I went to a place called UK Betting. And I sat next to Sean Graham, who was a wonderful judge. He works for Tony Bloom now, racing manager for Tony Bloom. But he was an absolute education. He's from the Sean Graham bookmaking family, an amazing guy, and he got fantastic racing cards. I'm sure he still did, and he was a very successful punter. But in some ways, you're better off knowing. Because often you'd get put off by knowing that, well, it missed a bit of work last week. It coughed. We're not sure they're right. Something's wrong with the feed. There's and there's not many stable lads, for example, driving Bentleys. So however much inside information you've got, you're better off having a good opinion, basically. And I think that applies to everything. And to be honest, with sharp betting, for instance, if you're making it pay on the back of your opinions, your systems, your pricing up, then that's a good advert for things being fairly straight, isn't it? Because you're not tapping in, the boxer had food poisoning last Wednesday, is it? It's not inside information. It's facts, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So again, sort of in the old school sort of mindset, when did you last place a bet on the high street?
I probably did a play spot when my wife was having her hair done, probably a year ago or something. I just don't go in betting shops, to be honest. There used to be I live in the south, and there used to be within about 2 miles. There probably used to be about 10, so you could have done it. I should think there's 2 left now. I mean, one of them's in Walton down the road, and it's like Wembley Stadium in there. You could play a game of football in them. There's I cannot understand how they're possibly still open unless it's for other reasons, which we probably don't want to go into. I'm baffled by, because they cost a fortune apart from anything else, and there's 3 people in them all day.
Yeah, I know. And so what would be the sort of the standout piece of advice you would give yourself going back 30 years?
Well, that is a good question. And I think what I'd say is slow down. Because I think when you're in your 20s, you're trying to win every penny. You're trying to be too aggressive, play too big. And because you're quite sort of risk adverse and you haven't got any responsibilities, you've got no mortgage, no kids, whatever. I think you can slow down. It doesn't have to be a rush. And I think being a bookmaker does teach you patience. Never chase, for instance. So we had 12 races at Reading. And another thing, I used to have a partner at the Dogs when I first started. Say we were winning 1,700 quid with a race to go. He used to say, I'm happy with that. We don't need to bet on the last race. Don't get involved. And that's absolute nonsense, isn't it? Yeah. What difference does it make Tuesday to the next? Exactly. When you walk on Thursday, it's just a time period, isn't it? Exactly. So, but the flip side of that is, if you were doing $3,000, should you be standing the last favourite for $3,000 to try and get out of it on that last? Well, of course you shouldn't. You just need to be patient and play the same, really. So, and that is good advice, I think, for anyone punting, especially anyone young, because we all get that feeling where you get hotted up and you start to sweat and you feel nervous because you're losing. and there is that feeling that that you've lost control and you need to win it back. And I think everybody gets that. You just got to try and avoid it, basically.
There's avoiding it, but there's also trying to learn to sort of kind of enjoy that part of it as well. Enjoy the sort of pain, the anxiety of like, sometimes you've got to like, you're going to get some bad runs and some good runs. And when you're in the bad runs, you've just got to accept it and say, oh, that's tough. And
well, the thing, I'm sure we don't understand it, but I went to a wedding the other day. What do normal people do on a Saturday? I mean, if you're not interested in sport and betting, I mean, I'm fascinated. I know you end up in a sort of garden centre, but I just cannot understand the mentality. It's a very hard thing to understand, isn't it? When you haven't got that, interest. I'm not even saying you have to be having a bet. It's not necessarily betting. It's the interest in sport. I've got a pal who's just not interested in sports at all. Yeah. He goes out and looks at sort of sewage works in Wandsworth, and he just it fascinates me. Fascinates me.
I wouldn't have gone there for the alternative. Okay, so are there any sort of products that you think would help your betting out there that you think the industry needs? Any sort of innovations or even like just legislative things that you think would be a good boost for the industry?
I do think there probably should be some sort of minimum requirement that you do have to lay a bet, really. I think if you got back to that, I think it would probably help everybody. I'm not saying you need to be able to back things to win £5,000, but I do think that like £100 would help, especially with a niche sport like dog racing. I mean, I know lots of greyhound punters, and a lot of them have walked away because they are you can literally get 80 pence on literally. So it becomes a complete way. It's quite involved to have an opinion on it. You've got to sit there for a long time and think about it. And if you cannot get on at all, I know a lot of people have walked away from it. So I think if they're offering markets, they probably should be obliged to. It's very difficult to enforce because, of course, the big firms will say, well, what happens is we get 1,000 people, all the same person, open up accounts, and they're all trying to back the same things. And if it's to win £100, all of a sudden we've stood something for 10 grand at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it's at completely the wrong price. But my answer to that would be, then you need to make sure your account opening things are better and tighter, and and trade the markets rather than the punters, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so I think you've seen a little bit of what we do at Sharp Betting. This is a chance you can plug us if you choose to, or say that you haven't looked at the site. But is there anything on the site that you've particularly enjoyed?
The thing I do like is I think you're doing is like a market movers thing now, like tracking the prices, and that is very interesting. And that would probably be a really good thing, particularly for people who've got accounts with the firms, unrestricted accounts. I know there's been a thing in the past, a rival maybe to you, which is Odds Monkey, which highlights where the movers are. And a lot of people have made a living from getting alerts about things shortening with Bookmaker A and but it is very interesting. I mean, the markets are fascinating. The one thing about the morning markets on the racing, how much percentage of it do you think is false signals now? Because the last sort of 90 seconds or 2 minutes now is everything, isn't it? There's a lot of things like 20 into 8 in the morning that is basically nonsense. It's a blocker from somebody who wants to be on something else. I think a lot of the time that they can manipulate on the exchanges for 70 quid. You can make something halve in price. And actually it might be because they want to be on A or B at the front of the market rather than F at the bottom of the market.
Well, it's interesting that you pick that feature up, because I know anecdotally from DMs and emails we get that people love that feature. They do. There are a lot of people looking for those signals. So it's interesting that you picked that. Okay, great. And so the final question before I get your sort of your social media and your YouTube and whatnot is, if I could offer you 5 to 1, and you've probably done this a few times, but if I could offer you 5 to 1 on a fair toss of a coin, heads or tails, 5 to 1, unlimited maximum stake, what would you transfer to me right now?
Well, with all respect to you, I would not be interested in that. I think sort of golden gooses and things like that, where it's too good to be true. I think, and actually, I had an interesting conversation on a slightly separate. Obviously, a lot of my friends now are getting into the black market, basically, where they're called social media bookmakers, aren't they? Basically, where you're betting on WhatsApp or through someone introduces you and things. And I haven't actually gone down that route, because I've still got the exchanges and stuff. But I do think that is a very dangerous, because all of us have got limited resources and things. You're putting £1,000 or £5,000 into the ether.
Yeah.
And there are horror stories galore out there that, you know, all of a sudden you're trying to log in the next day and it's disappeared, the account's gone, and that's only got to happen once, because you've got it's hard work to win, isn't it? You don't just because you find a black market bookmaker, you don't have to win either. You know, you can have months where it's going wrong, and what you said to me about when you started trialing, proving your tips a year or so ago, you had a quiet few months, didn't you? But then it's turned round since then. But anyone can lose for 2 or 3 months. So, you know, with these black market things, you don't actually have to win, and you're probably 11 to 10 to draw if you do win. So I think my advice would be tread carefully.
Well, Stephen, that question was just meant to be a bit of fun, but you've again given a very helpful answer. So yeah, reliable. Appreciate it. So we'll pull out that YouTube. Do you want to just read it out as well? So
yeah, it's Stephen Harris 1423, I think. Yeah. I'd be grateful if people do like and subscribe, because it helps us with our profile on YouTube. It's all free, and it'll stay free basically.
And it's you posting videos twice a day.
I just run through a couple of races every day, and with my thoughts of what's the value and what's a good bet, a nap and a value angle basically. So
great.
If people follow it,
they're about 2-minute clips. They're punchy. They're brilliant. I really like them. Yeah. Okay. And on the socials, anything else? Twitter.
Well, I'm on Twitter at StephenH61, but you'll probably have to suffer quite a lot of politics and arguing with people as well as racing stuff. So
perfect. Okay. Well, maybe we'll put some trumpets up there as well.
Yeah.
All right, Stephen, that was brilliant. Like really good to finally catch up with you again. I'm sure we'll talk more frequently going forwards. Thank you for your time and your insights. And yeah, brilliant conversation. Enjoyed it.
Thanks, David. That was great. Cheers.
See you soon.